All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Altcoin Daily, where you subscribe for daily videos on everything going on in the cryptocurrency space. You probably just watched our guest on our channel talk about Chainlink. He's back to talk about ADA, Cardano, fellow YouTuber, one of the best in the space, Ben Cowen. He approaches his videos and his analysis from a TA and an aggregated data analytics point of view. Ben, could you explain that a little bit more? And welcome to the channel again.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here. So basically, when we talk about TA on my channel, it might not be your traditional TA. More so like data science, just like mining the data and trying to find patterns and that sort of stuff. So it's more say data science, which again is a subset of TA at its core, but that's basically what it is.
Now, you are a big ADA believer. I know it's one of the 5 coins that you often talk about: Bitcoin, ETH, Link, Polkadot, whatever. What are the coins, Ben?
Bitcoin, Ethereum, Link, ADA, and DOT.
Cool. And you're a big ADA bull, so we look forward to hearing your, your price outlook as well as just different outlooks in general. Austin, anything before we jump in?
I would love for you to maybe just for the very new people, Ben, introduce in a sentence or two what Cardano is and then get into your charts.
Sure. So Cardano, so most people are probably very familiar with Ethereum. Cardano, markets itself sort of as like the third generation. But basically the idea is they're going to do stuff very similar, have smart contracts, be able to deploy that sort of stuff. Even platforms like, or say, the non-fungible token space, which everyone's super familiar with on Ethereum, that's coming to Cardano as well. They're solving some issues that Ethereum may have in their own way. And I think that it provides a nice hedge against Ethereum. And I don't, for the full disclosure, I don't consider ADA to be an Ethereum killer by any means. I consider it to be a hedge against Ethereum, and to be carving out its own niche in the space. So why don't we go ahead and jump in, because I think one of the key things to do when you talk about investing in altcoins is to really look at the data and say, hey, holding altcoins is super risky, and they need to be at least outperforming Bitcoin, because if they can't outperform the king, then why do you hold them? Because altcoins have more downside risk. I mean, imagine a world where Bitcoin has a capitulation. Not saying it would now, but in the future, Bitcoin will have a dump at some point. That's what it does. I mean, it corrects. It's what happens between those corrections that's important. And during that correction, we know that altcoins will bleed. So if the altcoin can't outperform Bitcoin, then in my opinion, there's no reason holding it. Can ADA outperform it? Well, this chart shows the normalized ROI from March 13th of 2020. You might wonder why it shows that date. That was when everything capitulated. Okay, that was the day that everything basically just went down 60%. Everyone woke up, and it was like a gut punch to the stomach when you just see your entire portfolio down 60%. And so sort of washed everything out. And we said, well, what is the ROI from that day? And the yellow line is Bitcoin. Okay. And a lot of the coins that I talk about, you may notice that DOT's not on here. DOT wasn't trading on the open market back in March, so that's why it's not here. But we also follow some other coins on the channel. We occasionally talk about VeChain, very occasionally talk about XLM, but this is not one I talk about that frequently. And you'll notice that Ethereum outperforms Bitcoin in the bull market. Link outperforms it. ADA outperforms it. I mean, all of these coins here, you see they're outperforming Bitcoin in the bull market. And that is the first thing you need to justify holding the coin in the first place. So we speculated back then that they should outperform it. And by the way, I have a chart that also has about 20 other altcoins on here. And the reason why they're not on here is because they did not outperform Bitcoin, or they haven't yet. And so you really want to get
enough colors or something.
What?
I thought maybe you didn't include all those other coins because you just ran out of colors.
No, yeah. There's about I think we started with about 20, 25 different coins or something, and most don't really stand the test of time. Now, I should say the first thing we have to do is we have to be fair to Bitcoin. We have to pay our dues to Bitcoin. To some degree, this type of chart is punishing Bitcoin because it didn't dump as bad as the altcoins did, right? So the ROI as measured from Bitcoin's dump might not be as great, but it also didn't crash as hard as the altcoins did either. So again, it's not the fairest comparison to the king of crypto. But I just have to put that caveat in there. So we look at ADA and we say, okay, guys, it's up at like what 60, 70x since March of 2020. Clearly, it is standing the test of time so far, and I think it will continue to stand the test of time. And one of the things we can look at are the different valuations we have against the US dollar, against Bitcoin, and against Ethereum. Okay, so we look at ADA on against the US dollar, and it goes to these phases similar to what we saw Ethereum do last market cycle. Okay, when you look at a bull market in its entirety, it might seem like things just go up forever, right? Here's Ethereum. But if you go back to last cycle, there were periods for Ethereum when it mostly just went sideways for a year, or even in this situation, didn't even put in a consequential new high and continue on for about a year. And so I'm not saying that ADA is going to be range bound for a year, but we have to recognize that phases like this do exist in the bull market, and they're not a bad thing. If you don't get phases like this, what ends up happening, right? Well, you get something that looks like 2017 where it just goes straight up and straight back down. And believe me, as someone who's lived through these markets, I mean, I know you guys have as well, but speaking to the audience, this is fun, but it's also a lot more stressful than this, where you just sort of you go up and then sideways and then up and then sideways, and occasionally you have a correction, a more systematic correction, maybe down to the 20-week SMA. So you go up and sideways, up, and then sideways, and then we went back down, tested the 20-week SMA or the 21-week EMA, whichever you prefer, and then we just continue to move. And we're sort of doing the same thing. And obviously there's the downside risk, and we're not going to pretend like there's not. In a bull market, we know that the 20-week SMA is the minimum downside risk, right? And for ADA, it currently ranges from about 89 cents up to 93 cents. So the great thing about ADA staying range bound for so long is the 20-week moving average has come to us rather than us going to the 20-week moving average in terms of ADA. Now, that doesn't mean we have to hold it. If you look at Ethereum, there was a phase last cycle where we actually briefly, I mean, very, very briefly went below it. And so that's just something to consider. But in the grand scheme of the cycle, you can see that Ethereum mostly held that 20-week moving average, right? And there were phases where it just trended sideways around that 20-week moving average, this being the main time that it had a dump below, representing a great reaccumulation phase. So going back to ADA, I see this as still a very much a long-term play. Now, buying ADA at $1.37 is a lot riskier than buying it at 2 cents. And I know you guys were talking about ADA when it was just trading for pennies as well. So obviously, talking about ADA or buying ADA when it's 2 cents is a lot less risky. But in the grand scheme of the cycle, I do think ADA has a ways to go. I don't think $1.36 is the market cycle top by any means, or $1.50. Market cycle tops don't look like this. Or even local tops, they don't tend to look like this. Again, just going back to Ethereum, the major moves like that, where you have these tops, it's a huge move over several weeks, followed by a long consolidation period. Every major blow off top that Ethereum had was followed by a long accumulation, or a long period like this. But none of those sideways movement areas represented, say, the new top, right? It didn't represent the new top. We ultimately were able to break out eventually. And so with ADA, I would say looking at its valuation against USD is great. What's more important, looking at its valuation against Bitcoin, okay? And we can use this to maybe talk about the theoretical upside. We've been, currently we're trading at around 23,000 or 2,300 Satoshis. The obvious place that maybe we'd be looking forward to would be this area, which would be a 79% move. For say like an invariant Bitcoin, which we know Bitcoin's not going to be invariant, but if it were an invariant Bitcoin, if we got, say, like let's say ADA went up 80% from the current prices, let's see where that would be. That would put us, right around 241 or so. And so I really like looking at its valuation against Bitcoin and its valuation against Ethereum, because these types of measurements are not like, against USD, we expect it to go up, right? Like over the long haul, if we're picking these projects, we expect it to go up against USD, because if it didn't, it's like, what are we talking about? Like, what are we wasting our time for? but they don't necessarily have to go up against Ethereum. They don't necessarily have to go up against Bitcoin forever, right? There could be these governing areas where it moves between. A great example is the ADA Ether valuation, okay? And this is one I love talking about on the channel because we have these local tops here, and the only times we've been able to move past these local tops was when we're in a bull market like this and here, okay? When ADA had this crazy move. And so I tend to think, you know what? It's possible that ADA goes into these crazy valuations against Ethereum that it hasn't seen before and goes up into these levels. But I certainly would not ever sell my Ethereum for ADA when it's up here, you know, because the first rule of crypto is, right, you don't go chase the pump. But there are times where it makes more sense. And you know, when you're back in the yellow region, it makes a lot more sense than doing it up in the red region. And when you're down here, I mean, we've only been down here, what, like 4 times? 1, 2, 3, and 4. We've only been on there 4 times. So whenever we're in that region, it's a great opportunity to pick up some ADA against Ethereum. So again, you can sort of see how we look at things from a macro perspective. We don't really care about things that happen on the daily time frame. You know, I have 5 major coins. I have a few others that I trade as well. And there's enough coins to where there's you know, every single month there's some major milestone happening, right? Whether it's, you know, some crazy extension of one coin against Ethereum, or maybe one coin's very undervalued against Bitcoin. And so I think by sticking to, say, 5, maybe 7 main coins in your portfolio, I have more coins than that in my portfolio, but those coins would, you know, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Link, ADA, and DOT constitute like 90 to 95% of my portfolio. Then it helps you to focus on, okay, what are these major momentum shifts in the market? Because, you know, none of us can really predict short-term moves. It's just like a random walk, and it's hard to really know what's going to happen in the short term. But whenever we're back in these regions against Ethereum, it's more likely to go up. And when we're up in these regions, it's more likely to go down. But as we're seeing right now, that doesn't necessarily mean the ADA USD valuation has to go down, because it's not, right? ADA USD is going sideways. It just gives you an idea that, is selling your ADA for Ether at this time a good idea? It makes more sense here than it does down here. So the whole idea is to figure out, when does it make sense to not necessarily trade one for the other, but if you're accumulating crypto, you know, try to figure out which ones are undervalued with respect to the other cryptocurrencies, so you can get maybe the most like bang for your buck in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm seeing from both the Cardano versus ETH and Cardano versus Bitcoin is, right now, we're not late, we're not early, we are right in the middle of this, let's call it a Cardano bull market. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, really, I've often said, you know, there's been a lot of crazy price predictions for ADA. I think that, you know, in the grand scheme of the market cycle, I think that it's going to go much higher than where it currently is. If I had to throw a ballpark number out there, I would say somewhere between like $5 to $10 is my guess. But again, you know, this is one of those things where if I'm wrong because it goes higher than $10, like, that's something I don't mind being wrong about. You know, my strategy is never like an all in or all out approach. It's more like just dynamically DCing out of the market. Like, you know, in the same way you move into the market, you can also move out, right? You don't have to go all out at the same time. You can just kind of take profits along the way. You're not going to go broke taking profits, right? You're not going to go broke taking profits. So, you know, if I'm selling ADA one day at $8 or $9 and it goes to $12, I'll still have a little bit. So I would say, you know, probably somewhere between $5 to $10 this market cycle. But I can also tell you too that if we go there, it's going to be one crazy journey, and we're not going to go straight to those levels, right? We're probably going to have some major pullbacks along the way. And the way we look at that is noting that Ethereum had some pretty major pullbacks last cycle as well. But everyone looks at Ethereum and remembers it as, you know, the last cycle was just this crazy bull market. But remember, even with Ethereum, it still was capable of going down 60% at times, you know, 60, 70%. So that happened a couple times when Ethereum had a 60 to 70% pullback. So could ADA do the same at various phases? Of course. I mean, maybe one day it goes to $3 and then has a pullback to $1.50 or something, you know? So I think that it can go to those levels, but it's certainly not going to be an easy ride by any stretch of the imagination.
Damn, $5 to $10 ADA. I mean, I kind of believe it, man. It's like, seems to me like the cycle is going to be similar to a 2017, but there's just way more infrastructure, and, you know, coins that are developing and have great narratives are going to do well. And I mean, as long as people are speculating hard on ETH, as long as people like ETH, and it's obvious like what kind of trade-offs ETH has and how, you know, there are high gas fees, I think people are going to be interested in things like Cardano.
Exactly. And it's sort of buying the narrative, right? Like buying, that's exactly what people are going to think. And I mean, it makes sense to think that. And that's why ADA is one of my primary hedges against Ethereum, because I mean, this isn't the first time we're going to see that type of, you know, that type of mentality play out, like where we saw ADA go up against Ethereum, you know, over several weeks like crazy. It's not the first time we've seen it, and it's not going to be the last, right? So it's just a matter of time before we get back to that phase of the cycle. Right now, it's Ethereum's time to shine. And remember, when Ethereum's moving like this, most altcoins are not. And so we just sort of have to bide our time. And by the way, remember too, if ADA USD keeps going sideways and Ether keeps skyrocketing, I mean, guess where this is going? I mean, it's still going down, and that can present an opportunity, right? But the downside is that at that point, like imagine Ethereum just keeps going up for a couple weeks or something. If this keeps coming down, this is probably when some people are going to think, oh, okay, now it's time to sell my ADA for ETH, you know, but really you should be thinking about it the other way around. Like, no, you don't chase the pump, right? You try to de-risk by getting out of the one that's been pumping like crazy for months and months and months, and go back to the one that maybe has been stabilized for a couple months.
I loved this perspective. This is exactly why I subscribe. Benjamin, final thoughts for the Altcoin Daily audience, and thank you so much for coming on our channel.
Yeah, I think navigating crypto is really challenging, especially for new people to the space. You know, the volatility can turn some stomachs for sure. I think, you know, no matter really what you subscribe to in terms of where Bitcoin is headed or how high exactly it's going to go, I think most people would agree, and most models show that time is on our side with Bitcoin. In the grand scheme of the market cycle, we can have corrections. In the grand scheme of the market cycle, time is on our side with Bitcoin. And if time is on our side with Bitcoin, then time is on our side with altcoins. So I think I'll just leave them with that. Don't stress about the daily moves. Just take a step back, go outside, and just sort of ride the market cycle. And hopefully we're going to a place we all want to be.
To the moon. All right. Thank you so much, Benjamin, for coming on. Links to all Ben's stuff is in the description. Everybody can go check out and subscribe to him. And we'll all see you tomorrow.